How's it going, Lee?
I'm good. How are you?
Where are you playing out of, Lee?
I am playing out of Raleigh, North Carolina.
All right, so North Carolina. Is this in like some sort of home game?
Yeah, so what this is actually a social club game. So it's a social club that does a
Social club that does a time break. Okay. And what's the size of the game?
it is 1 to 500 cap and it is match stat.
Okay, and how deep are you?
900 effective with the main villain. He has 900 and I have him covered.
Okay. Start us off here.
Okay, so a little bit of background on this particular villain. He is an older gentleman, probably mid 70s. Kind of has some old OMC tendencies, but he is a little looser than a typical OMC, so he will mix it up just a little bit more. And he does have a limping, range, but he comes out under the gun and he makes it 17 from under the gun.
So 17, that's a very large raise, right? Or is this a typical raise?
So this particular game, the typical pre-flop had been between 10 and 15, and sometimes they will do increment bets like 12 or 13, but between 10 and 15 had been typical. So this was a little bit bigger than usual.
Okay.
And so it folds around to the hijack, and the hijack calls, and then I'm in the cutoff with pocket nines, nine of
So the hijack calls, your heroes in the cutoff with nine of spades, nine of hearts.
not a red nine.
So under the gun to 17, hijack calls hero in the cutoff with red nines, okay?
Yes, correct.
And what
So I was kind of this was kind of borderline for me. I was kind of torn between calling and putting in the three bet. Since it was such a big bet open from under the gun, I decided to just flat.
So hero calls. Obviously, you have a squeeze spot because of the dead money here from the hijack. I mean, if you have a really OMC nitty type of guy here, this might be one of the few times that you would maybe see a reflection here, of an overcall. I mean, obviously you could three bet fold here too, or just try to get the guy out from the hijack and see how the UTG guy responds. But okay, so you make the call.
Okay, yeah, I do make the call,
Mhm.
and it folds around the rest of the way.
Okay, so it's three ways.
Yep, three ways.
So it looks like it's what, maybe 50 bucks or something?
Yeah, yeah, I had 54, but we could say 55 just to
Okay.
make it easy.
All right, so 55 in the pot. Okay.
Okay, and then the flop comes King 2 4 Rainbow.
So king of spades, four of clubs. I'm going to put deuce of hearts. Okay.
Yeah.
Hmm.
The under the gun actually checks,
Okay.
and then the hijack checks,
Hmm.
and then I check as well.
So check, and hero checks behind. So, I think that when you're dealing with somewhat of a type player from under the gun, so, it's like, what is his range here? It's probably not a whole lot of things that are going to necessarily fold to a bet. So you always have these sandbagging types of hands, like he's flop pocket kings, ace king, maybe he's going for a check raise, pocket ace is something like that. Or he could have a pair that is under a king, like say like tens, jacks, queens. And I don't think that those hands are necessarily going to fold. You could make a case, maybe three ways, for making a very small protection-y, I suppose, type of bet here with nines because your hand needs some protection. It's probably pretty close. But I think the chances here that you get called by worse or get a better hand to fold probably aren't that large.
And at the moment, betting didn't really. I really didn't strongly consider betting for that exact reason. I wasn't really sure what I was going to get called by that would be worse at that particular moment. So I did decide to just go with the check.
JB Bruno in the live chat says, I don't like checking. You need protection. Your bet in position could get him off a better hand. If it could, yes. But if you just heard what I said before, I don't think that that's the case. So hero checks behind. Okay.
Yes.
Yep.
Okay. And so the turn comes a 7, completing the rainbow.
All right. So I'm going to put in 7 of diamonds, king of spades, 4 of clubs, deuce of hearts, turns to 7 of diamonds. Okay.
And under the gun checks again.
Mm-hmm.
Hijack checks again.
Okay.
So at this point, I do figure that it's a pretty good chance that I have the best hand here. So I do go ahead and lead out in bet 20.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, I mean, if you're not going to bet the flop here, I think you can bet the turn. And I'm going to assume, as played this way, if you bet, you don't need to bet large for protection. If the guy calls, the UTG guy, you're probably just going to check back rivers, right? For the most part, I would assume.
Yep. Yeah. If he calls, yeah, and then checks river, I'm just checking back.
So here bet's 20. Okay.
Okay, and then under the gun calls
Okay.
and the hijack.
All right. So under the gun calls and the hijack folds. So, I mean, you could sometimes still maybe be ahead here. It's very surprising for him to really have a strong hand here. Like a strong hand as me defining as a king plus, things like that. But it could be like some jacks and tens, but I think your hands, we don't necessarily turn this one into a bluff necessarily, but I like the protection bet. So under the gun calls, hijack folds, and now the pot is 95. Okay.
Yep, and that's what I was thinking too. If he's calling there, there was no real draws out there, so I'm kind of putting him on, maybe some ace highs that he just doesn't want to let go, or possibly a pair under the kings.
Okay.
All right, and then the river comes a 9.
Oh,
doesn't matter the suit, but
okay. So now we have a situation here. Before you even tell me what happens, we've already played this hand out where we were going to just check back like blank rivers, right? We have said already that we think the guy's range is like probably not things that are very strong. It's probably not a king. Just the way that this hand played out, unless he's got like the super nuts or something like that. But in terms of like most of the hands are not something that's very strong. So with that being said, if he checks to you, do you think that the river bet should be large, or do you think it should be medium/small?
So so I'm thinking the river bet should be kind of medium/small to try to
That makes
get
sense.
value from any pairs that he was calling with under the kings.
Now I will say,
if he's got jacks or tens.
Yes, that makes a whole lot of sense based upon what his range is. The point that I was making was that there are times where you back into a nuttish type of hand. Now you have the second nuts, right? There's no straight out there. There are times when you back into a nuttish type of hand that warrants a small bet. Like you have the second nuts and the situation warrants a small bet for value. And then there are times where you might just have one pair that is good where you could just move all in. So it really, really depends on the situation, not the strength of your hand and what you think your opponent's range is in terms of evaluating what a value bet is. Now, I will say, though, you could actually go kind of on the large side here with the way that the action went, and you still might get called by like tens through queens because the guy might figure you wouldn't have checked a king on the flop. And the pot isn't that big. It's not like it's 500. It's still a relatively small, which is one of those CLP small stakes exploits. Like it's not really about percentage of pot size when the pot gets really small or really big. Like if the pot's 1,000 and you bet 400, that might be a really big bet for this game as opposed to looking at it like a 40% pot size bet. Here, the pot's really small. So if I were to bet like a 95 here, it's not really that big of a bet, even though it's 100% of pot and you check through on the flop. So that's what I'm talking about here. So does he check here?
Yeah, he does check.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
And so I decided to go about 2/3. So I did want to try to make it small enough to where the under pairs to the king would still call. So I went to roughly 2/3 and I bet 60.
Okay.
And then the villain check raises to 125.
125.
Yeah, so basically a min click.
I was going to say, how did we not know that was going to come here? But it's so small, though. So I remember this email. I remember this hand, like a min raise, right? This is insane. So there's a couple things that I'm going to say here. And it really does actually have to do with his small sizing here on the river. So you have the second nuts, right? And you lose to pocket kings. But it makes sense that the guy might actually have pocket kings. Could he have some other hands here that he might actually do this with for value? It's kind of weird because I would have thought that aces or ace king would have tried to put some money in at some point. They're not like invulnerable to everything. If you are going to make this play, you have to remember that you have to fold. So you could click this back as a 3-bet fold for value. What I mean by that is that you could make it something like 350, and then if he came back over the top, you could fold knowing that he just always has pocket kings, and that's the absolute nuts. Now, in order to make that play, he has to call with worse. So he would have to make this play with aces, ace king, and call like a little dink and dunk 3-bet on the river here to 325. As crazy as it sounds, I might just lean towards a call because I don't know if he gets here like this with aces or ace king. Now, could he have pocket sevens though? How about that? Could he have pocket sevens here, Lee?
So in my mind, real time. So I kept going back to the pre-flop action, and the fact that this particular villain does have a limping range pre-flop. I have seen him limp quite a few times. The only two hands that made sense to me were pocket kings or possibly pocket sevens.
Right.
I just didn't see anything else really making sense.
I mean, here's the thing. If he ever had ace king or aces here as played, and I think guys would, like, if they're going to check raise minimum and you come back over to 300 to 325, I think they will call. I would strongly consider doing that. I just don't know if like they get here like that. So then you're just kind of left with kings and you're left with sevens, and someone might be like, well, yeah, but that's just like half and half, right? There's 3 combos of kings, 3 combos of sevens. I suppose that's true, but at the same time, kings are much more likely to, I think, slow play. It's likelier to slow play, even though the 7 appeared on the turn. Kings are likelier to slow play and play it this way than sevens. So it's just one of these things where it's really close. Like, say he's got 3 combos of kings and 3 combos of 7-7. You're losing when you put in the extra money with kings, right? Because he's going to jam and you're going to fold. And then you're winning the money when he puts in with sevens. So it sort of just breaks even. But I think if he just shows up with more king here, then you kind of, even though it just feels so disgusting, I might just call at the end.
Yeah, and I really went into the tank on this one when he did this because ace king or aces just didn't really make sense to me in the moment, but just because I just didn't see him checking all the way down to make a check raise with aces or ace king. I just in the moment I just couldn't picture him doing that. So kings made sense, and then possibly pocket sevens made sense.
By the way, for anybody, Ben Musher, I've never seen this guy, he said in the live chat, 3-bet folding seems pretty awful here. Do we know him well enough to know he just doesn't massively overvalue his hand sometimes? I've seen some older guys consider top 2 or 7-7 or maybe ace to be the nuts here. Ben, I'm telling you, I would bet my left nut that if Lee here 3-bet the river, the only hand that would jam is king. I'm telling you right now. Okay? It's not going to be ace. So I could comfortably 3-bet fold the river. It doesn't make it correct, though, if the guy just doesn't have anything else. But you know what's interesting here is that it's like we're saying that he's got like king here always. There's always that little extra added thing where, well, if we 3-bet the river, does he call here with anything worse besides 7-7? If a guy is somehow playing ace king or aces this way, I think he calls like the 325, 350. But I
agree with that. I do think if he plays pocket aces or ace king this way, I do think if I min click him, he's going to probably go ahead and make the call.
Yeah.
So it just in the moment, I did not. Him having ace king or aces just wasn't really on my radar in the moment. It just didn't seem like they would have played it this way.
I mean, I think that's what it really comes down to. If you think he ever has aces or ace king and we beat 7-7, I would 3-bet fold. If we just want to be just like that we're just not going to ever see that, then I suppose you just call. What did you end up doing?
I went into the tank for a while, and I was going back and forth between making a small raise and just calling. I just could not. I was just having a hard time not putting him on pocket kings here. So I've made a crying call.
Crying just call.
Crying just call. So yeah, so I did end up just flatting.
And what was the result?
And it was a punch in the gut. He had pocket twos.
Pocket twos. Well, that's another. So, so that we kind of washed over that a little bit there too. We washed over the smaller sets, maybe because it was just so strange. Like I would have said, if someone had brought up, well, what about fours and deuces? I would have been like, well, fours and deuces I would find it more believable than ace, king, or aces here, right?
Yes.
But I still think fours and deuces at some point in money though, like check calling flop and just check calling turn to like min check raise river. And then just an OMC guy like opening like deuce for that large. I mean, when you add those in, then obviously you want to three bet fold more. But what I guess my point is that like he's not going to jam with deuces if you go to 325, 350, you know?
No, probably not. Yeah, he's just calling with twos, and that's why I was so disgusted when I saw it, because I know he would have just called. The fact that I kept going back to the pre-flop in my mind, and twos and fours just really weren't on my radar because he does have a limp range. So if I can't even imagine what he's limping with if this is how much he raises pocket deuces under the gun. So
yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, it's kind of interesting. The live chat, some people are saying like, how do you just call here? There are a lot of people that said that they would just call. Like I said, I think it's close, but I truly do believe. Here's the thing though that changes here. It becomes much more of a call if when you 3-bet the river, you call off. Because I think when you 3-bet the river, if you call off, you're almost always losing more money. So if you're the type of player that wants to 3-bet call this river, that's the worst play. 3-bet calling the river is actually worse than just calling the check raise. How about that? To wrap it up in a bow. So,
and I was a little concerned about that. If I raised him there, then I have to ask myself, am I good enough to fold?
That's always the question, right?
I knew that that's what I was supposed to do. If I raised him there and he jams, I know I'm supposed to fold, and I wasn't sure if I was good enough to fold.
I've said that a lot. I said you have to ask yourself. I said sometimes in these situations like raise folding is the right play, but are you going to fold if you get re-raised? And if you're not, it changes the equation up as to what you're going to do because you're going to lose more money, right?
Right.
So anyways, I appreciate the call. Thank you very much.